Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Random Jank. Now, last time when I was making a video like this, we made a pre-release deck, and taking my own advice, I went to the Gate Crash pre-release. In the first round, I got second place. I've never gotten second place before. The next set of matches was actually a two-headed giant, which I'll be talking about in a future video, and in that one, me and my partner got first place. So, watch my videos and you'll be successful. Now, in my haste to make a video that was relevant for something that was coming up really soon, I kind of skipped over a really important thing: how to play the game in the first place. Unfortunately, my ability to teach people is not always up to par. So, in the description down below, I have a link or two to a couple of videos that would actually be able to explain way better than I could. And on top of that, if you are a video gamer rather than just a card gamer, there are video games called Duels of the Planeswalkers, which actually would be able to teach you way better than even those videos would, because you're learning through experience rather than just somebody talking to the camera. 2 weeks ago, when I put out my first video, I brought up the concept of Lifegain not necessarily being a solid concept to just build a deck around. The thing is, this is random jank, not random top decks. And whenever I ever hear about a concept that doesn't really do well or isn't 100% competitive, my brain goes, challenge accepted. And the first thing I do is make a deck completely based around that idea. So, I have a 60-card deck with me right now to show you which cards to make a at least decently solid Lifegain-centric deck. Here are all the creatures. Now we have 4 Trained Caracals, 4 Ajani Sunstrikers, 4 Seraph of Dawns, 4 Dagger Dome Imps, and my favorite, 4 Vampire Nighthawks. Now, in order to make this Lifegain deck work exceptionally well, or at least have a decent shot at winning, I made sure every single one of my creatures had lifelink. What you want to do with this deck is attack every turn possible where you're not going to be losing any creatures, and gaining life every single turn. Now, you want to at least, if in a one-on-one game, have 30 life, so that these 3 cards can actually activate. Chalice of Life. It's a flip card from Dark Ascension. Basically, it costs 3, you put it into play, you tap 1, you gain a life. Fits in with our theme very well. But the flip is, if you have at least 10 more than your starting life in a one-on-one game, that's 30, it actually flips to be tap, target opponent loses 5 life. And granted, having your creatures attack every turn is a good idea, and if your opponent isn't going to be blocking them, they're losing life anyways. Having a direct way of having your opponent lose life is a lot better than trying to get through with a few weak creatures. On top of that, we have some utility cards, things that are going to be helping us actually be able to punch through with that damage. The first 2 is Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. Now, all of its abilities work to our advantage. Its +1 is to put a lifelink vampire into play. Its -2 is to put an emblem, which gives all of your creatures +1/+0 essentially until the game ends, because at the moment there is no good removal for emblems. There's something for planeswalkers, creatures, enchantments, artifacts, everything, except for emblems. They're pretty much unstoppable. And its -6, you destroy any 3 targets, and if they hit the grave, they go to you. So, if you're trying to clear your path for the final bits of damage, just bomb your opponent's creatures, and you'll actually have something on defense in case that plan does not work. Now, you've seen the creatures, you've seen our basic win conditions, and like I said before, lifelink on its own isn't necessarily a concept that works well, like in general. It's not very competitive. And I thought the best way to be able to support a concept that doesn't really work well in practice is to support it with another concept that does not work well in practice. Case in point, enchantments. The problem with enchantments is that, especially with enchantments on creatures, if the creature dies, all the enchantments on top of it also die. So for one of your opponent's kill spells, he's killing maybe 2 or 3 of your things all in one shot. Not necessarily the most competitive things. But that's how my decks work. So, the main crux of this idea is Ethereal Armor. I'm running 4. It's 1 white. You put it on a creature, it gets +1/+1 for every other enchantment that you have, and it gets first strike. So it works decently well considering all your creatures have lifelink, and it works especially well on the Vampire Nighthawk, who has Death Touch and Flying as well. So you're going to be able to pretty much block everything with that Nighthawk if it has one of these things on. And because Ethereal Armor works well with other enchantments, the rest of the cards that I have, besides the win conditions and creatures, are enchantments as well. I put in 4 pacifisms to be able to stop your opponent's biggest creatures, and 4 stab wounds, which doesn't kill the creature outright. It only gives it -2, -2. But that's not really what you want to use it for. You don't want to use it as a kill spell. You want to put it on an even bigger creature so that your opponent loses 2 life every turn. They either have to kill their own creature or they have to put themselves in a situation where losing 2 life actually doesn't matter. Now, anytime you have any deck, you need to make sure that your mana base is just as solid as the cards that's in it. Mana isn't all that exciting. It's just a land that you tap to be able to cast your really pretty cards. But without those mana, you wouldn't be able to cast those cards in the first place. So, here is where my own personal run of this deck shows a lot of weaknesses. The problem is I don't have a lot of dual lands, and I definitely don't have a lot of money to spend on dual lands to be able to make sure I get all my land drops all in one shot at the right colors. The only thing that I have at the moment is one isolated chapel. It comes into play tapped unless you have a plains or a swamp, but it taps for either white or black, so it does do a little bit of color fixing. To try and augment that a little bit, I'm also running 3 Evolving Wilds, because that way I can get a swamp or a plains based on what's in my hand, so I actually get all my colors as soon as possible. On the lucky side of things, I'm only running 2 colors, so in theory I should be able to get everything all in one shot, but you never know, and you don't want to take too many chances. I'm also running 8 plains and 7 swamps. The main reason behind that particular split is that there's a lot more double white than there is double black. The only double black is actually the Vampire Nighthawk. Everything else in the deck is mostly white in the first place. Having plains more than swamps is more helpful than trying to have everything all in one shot. And then the last thing that I have is Vault of the Archangel. I'm running 4 of them. It's actually an adjustment that I have to make at some point because 4 is way too many. Because it taps itself and 4 of your mana to be able to give all your creatures lifelink and death touch. Which is kind of useless because all of your creatures already have lifelink anyways, and lifelink doesn't stack. You don't get 2 instances of lifelink if the creature has lifelink twice. The main reason why I'm running it is for the death touch, because if I don't have a Vampire Nighthawk on, but I do have the creature with an ethereal armor on, it has death touch as soon as I tap that land with 4 other mana. It's a solid deck, it's done its business, it has done successfully at times, but if you're trying to race somebody or if you're playing a combo deck where they can get bigger creatures out than you could in a much faster time, it's not the best deck in the world. But hey, like I said, this is Random Jank and not Random Top Decks. So I will see you next Friday when I show something that's a little bit more personal than just a random deck list. I'll see you then.